All right, Carson, let's take a look at your essay. So, starting away with your hook in the way you start your paper, it's pretty good. You talk about media being everywhere on our phones, in our classrooms, and newspaper stands outside of restaurants, bombarded by old people at 3 p.m. There's kind of a humorous flair to this, which is good. Even though for academic papers you may want to focus a little bit more on the formal, I will let this be okay for now as long as it's consistent, and we'll talk about style with it there. So with your hook, when you start a paper, that's the only place I really give leeway if you use that first or second person. So when you move here, regardless of where you are, you could instead rephrase it to be regardless of where someone is, the media, is always present, whether we are cognizant of it or not. Okay, so news spreads like wildfire. Good media does contribute to the spreading rumors and false news, which causes hysteria in people around the world. And because of the media, this is where we're getting into your thesis. I think this is a really good way to explain it. Because of the media, certain things can be altered, and the original message of something may be changed completely, almost like a game of telephone. I think what's good here is you have a thesis that, well, first of all, you're not directly saying media is more potent, but because you're not saying, because you don't have anything that implies that human nature is more potent with it, this works. So with that in mind, having this simile works really well for the reader to look at this as part of your thesis, that this is like a game of telephone and this is how media contributes to it. But as we move to your first body paragraph, 1, 2, 3, you have, I don't know, I'm assuming this is part of that paragraph. But anyways, this is a very, very short body paragraph. You talk about the article, an example of it, and then hysteria of an actual Martian invasion hit the town of this place in New Jersey and spread quickly from there. So having a short paragraph like this is okay if you have more than a 5-paragraph essay, because with the 5-paragraph essay structure, you have 2 body paragraphs that are going to be completely what your perspective is, and then it's going to use evidence and analysis with that. So realistically, what you have here is a good piece of evidence that can support you for media propelling this, but you don't really have analysis with it. The analysis comes later. Rito's becoming popular, people are turning in. So this transitions well, and it did make people think there was a national emergency. Leads into the gullible. So let's talk about this for a second. Your transition is good. The problem is it's not going to lend enough to your body paragraphs. You can't get away with this being a body paragraph or your 5-paragraph essay just because this is transitioning well, because you're not using enough context or evidence with it per se. You need to look at that paragraph structure. So people believe this. You have a contraction here, so be aware of that. You don't want to use any contractions. And then right here, I'm seeing this a lot. A lot of you are looking at apps, but apps actually stands for application. So you would want to say applications. I don't think it's quite in the vernacular yet to use apps. So with that being said, so you talk about how media works. So overall, this is pretty good. You're talking about the specific example with some analysis about how people believe it, and we look at it for vital information. But then the problem comes here is Ebola and then crucible. You have 2 sentences on Ebola, 2 sentences on the crucible, and then you have all this as part. And then you have all this as part of your same paragraph. So part of the problem with what is going on here is you have all this going on, literally all of this with the same example, and then you just throw in a sprinkle of Ebola here and a sprinkle of the crucible in here. So I like here how you're explaining how this could be an example of media, about how people get that information. Not quite what I was looking for with the definition, but I will let it slide because we were more looking at media in a broader spectrum of people having instant access to something and having that capability. And not everyone in Salem could get that. They would have to go to the church for that. So like I said, overall, Carson, your writing is pretty good here, but you're kind of detracting a little bit from what we had earlier. You had a humorous part, which, like I said, doesn't necessarily work in such a formal paper, where with whatever. Um, so that's not really translating through the rest of this. But also, with that in mind, you really want to focus on the analytical and evidence component from the text and really have that spread between two paragraphs. Because right now you have one paragraph that's like, here's this example of the Martians, and then you separate into the next paragraph to explain that, and then throw in these two real quick ones at the end. So moving on into your opposition paragraph. Although points have been made about the media's role in human hysteria, some psychologists, doctors, and normal people alike do also believe that hysteria comes from our own brain. So all of this is pretty good. So you're talking about how hysteria looks at how humans and human nature does this. However, the only problem, and this is pretty good, so you have some good writing in here. So your paragraph acknowledges the other side, but you don't have anything to refute it. And that's the key thing with your opposition. If back when we did the peer reviews and you had the opportunity to self-evaluate yourself, part of that is with your opposition, you need to refute it and come back with, here is another example and more analysis that proves my own side. Okay, so, and then when we get to your conclusion, it's very short. It's just 2 sentences, so it's kind of a weak conclusion. And I never want to be like, this, paragraphs have to be exactly between 5 and 7 sentences, because it doesn't work like that. But with if you stick to a 5-paragraph essay, you need to really be able to have your conclusion wrap up all your main thoughts and do it insightfully. And so how you have it, in conclusion, media does affect the lives of people in ways good and bad. Sorry, you have 3 sentences. Media moves quicker and gets to more people than normal talking and gossip. The media controls more of our life than we do know. So it restates your thesis a little bit and restates some things. But with that in mind, overall, Carson, what I'm noticing with your essay is it's just a little bit short. Let me pause this recording for a second. So anyways, as I was saying, I think you need to benefit from having more body paragraphs that really uses specific examples with specific analysis that ties back to your thesis. I think your thesis needs to be a little bit more clear in the beginning. Because your introduction is pretty good. Your body paragraphs, I mean, you do have 3, but I think you're lacking a little bit with some of the specific analytical and the specific specific analysis and specific examples. And I think that's what would make your essay a lot better if you focus on that. So if you do the rewrite, you're going to need to focus more on using specific examples. Having that, and I know I'm just repeating myself, and I don't mean to, but, and then using that and having analysis that ties back to media being more potent. And right now, I think yours is just really running short. So adding that, fluffing up your writing a little bit, will make it a better approach for where you should be.